I'm glad that I'm the one who found you. That's why I'm always hanging round you. Do I love you? Oh my, do I? Honey, honey, deed I do.
Good evening and welcome to the 5th episode of KBTV, the Kennington Bioscope's online show broadcasting both live and partly pre-recorded, coming to you from various locations around London town, from my front room and also the homes of Cyrus Gabrysch and John Sweeney, who has now, I am happy to report, joined Cyrus and I in being capable of a live internet link-up, and who will therefore be live accompanying later on in the show our very first YouTube feature presentation and web premiere of 1917's Kidnapped, from the story by Robert Louis Stevenson, about more of which we will hear later on from myself, and in our special guest introduction recorded for us just a few days ago out of her silent bunker in Southern California from Fritzi Kramer of Movie Silently website fame, the lady responsible for researching, resurrecting and releasing tonight's main film presentation, which comes to us by kind courtesy of the Library of Congress. To start the show, we have two films coming to us again by continuing generosity of the remarkable Jean Desmet collection, an internationally important holding of over 900 films plus related ephemera. Jean Desmet was one of the leading cinema operators and film distributors in the Netherlands from 1907 to 1916, and the films he saved are preserved and housed by the Dutch National Archive at the Filmmuseum in Amsterdam. First up, we have the rambunctious Robinet's White Suit from 1911, a short comedy from a prolific series by an international man of comedic mystery. In the Dutch edition of Robinet's films, he is known as Nook, and in the US, the film is known as Tweedledum's White Suit. For the man in the white suit here is none other than one Marcel Perez, or Marcel Fabre, or Michelle Fabre, or is it Fernandez Perez, or indeed Manuel Fernandez Perez? The very nature of the shape-shifting nomenclature of our mysterious comedic hero in this instance has, coupled with the scarcity of his work, certainly contributed to his reputation, to quote his biographer, Steve Massa, as perhaps the best silent comedian no one's ever heard of. Although both Steve and Ben Model have gone a long way to changing that situation now with their work and Ben's crowd-funded release of 2 volumes of Marcel Perez shorts. Perez starred in 221 known comedy films and was, again to quote Steve Massa, an international favourite and, along with Max Linder, one of the few direct links between European and American comedy. Having worked in circuses as a young man, Madrid-born Marcel was no stranger to moving around for work, and so when he started making films around 1900, rolling up in one place and then another and working for different film companies, his versatility as a comedian meant that he needed different character names for each one to be associated with a particular studio. Therefore, Robinet was his Italian studio character name. When he moved to the United States in 1916, he was featured as Bungles for the Vim Comedy Film Company of Jacksonville, Florida, where he acted alongside Oliver Hardy, and with whom he also alternated directing duties. He was Tweedledum for Eagle Films Company and Tweed Dan for the American Jester Company, with 8 of these comedies being set in cowboy country and shot in San Antonio, Texas, with the Shamrock Photoplay Corporation. He was known simply as Tweedy for the Schiller Company, which itself seemed to have plenty of aliases with its Aladdin comedies, Mirth comedies, and Sunlight comedies. And although she doesn't appear in this film, his usual early comedy co-star was Italian actress Nilda Baracchi, who appeared as his comedy wife, Robinet, from 1911 through to 1915, and who accompanied Perez to the States, and then was also listed variously as Babette Perez and Nilda Babette, continuing to work with Marcel until there seemed to be a parting of the ways in 1919 because of, or after which time he found a new female comedy partner in Dorothy Earle, with whom he married and had a child, Nilda having returned to Italy. Marcel's career in Hollywood, however, carried on unabated, and even with fewer on-screen credits to his name, he found gainful employment as a valuable gag man in the movie scene. In fact, in an interesting article from 1924 entitled In the Temples of Teehee, How Comedy Farces Are Constructed by Comedy Architects, fascinating facts are given on the salaries of the top gag writers of the time. Chuck Reisner for Chaplin was unsurprisingly on the top money at $750 a week. Sam Taylor and H.M. Walker, sorry, lost my place a second, it jumped. Sam Taylor and H.M. Walker, both working for Harold Lloyd and Joe Mitchell for Buster Keaton, all earned $500 respectively, and Marcel Perez was on $400 a week working for Jimmy Aubrey, a Bolton lad who had been part of Fred Karno's troupe and an early understudy for Chaplin, and who also had his own series of comedies in which Oliver Hardy usually appeared as a villain. Marcel, by 1926, was directing a lavish 2-reel blue ribbon comedy production for Joe Rock entitled Mummy Love, starring Alice Ardell and Neely Edwards, featuring mighty catacombs and mummy caves, and a desert scene of great proportions. But by 1928, he had directed his last film, and the following year he passed away aged just 44. The Turin-based producer of this short film, the both beautifully named and artfully mustachioed Arturo Ambrosio, had a hand in the biggest list of film credits I think I've ever seen on IMDb, tipping the scales at well over 1,300. And although the short is Italian-made, the eagle-eyed among you will notice a barometer near the start of the film is a French one, and I assume this shot was inserted for the Francophone audience. And Ben Model tells me that Robinet's white suit is a real favourite amongst fans of Marcel Perez. So we're in for a short, sharp treat with this one, accompanied live for you by our show producer, Cyrus Gabrysch. And after that, we can settle ourselves down and glide along gently with a lovely tinted Phantom River ride from 1912 along the Pescara river system in eastern central Italy, from its source in the mountains towards the Adriatic Sea. This little scenic was also produced by the aforementioned Arturo Ambrosio, and the film is steered by the sure hands of Maestro Costas Fotopoulos. Welcome back, and thank you to Costas and Cyrus for your super playing, and to the Filmmuseum for the first half of tonight's programme. So for this 5th episode of our live show, which has been running now over the last 10 weeks from deepest lockdown to where we find ourselves at present, presented for you in lieu of our regular shows held at the temporarily closed Cinema Museum London, we have reached a point on a journey, as have many others, on this learning curve of live online broadcasting, where we are now ready and proudly in a position to bring you our first full feature presentation with live piano cam accompaniment by leading silent film musician who is presently standing by in his South London home, Mr. John Sweeney. Tonight we present to you the Edison Film Company's 1917 film of Kidnapped, Robert Louis Stevenson's immortal story of adventure. The film is the earliest celluloid version to have been produced, based on the Scottish author's famed boys' novel, first published in serial form in Young Folks magazine from May to July 1886. In Scotland in 1751, young David Balfour is shanghaied aboard a ship where he meets Jacobite rebel Alan Breck, with whom he escapes to the Scottish Highlands, dodging the redcoats. The film was thought lost, but was residing, unloved and forsaken, but safely preserved by the Library of Congress, and we present it in association tonight with its rescuer from oblivion, Fritzi Kramer, of US-based Movie Silently website, passionate celebrant of silent movies, their ardent and prolific reviewer and Twitter commentator, silent era cookbook enthusiast, and ace maker of silent film gifs, who was the one who researched and sourced the film, overseeing and producing its limited home video release in 2018, crowdfunded via a successful Kickstarter campaign with over 300 contributors, of whom myself and many other friends and acquaintances happily donated, and all of whom are listed in the video's end credits, so keep them peeled as the role unfolds. We all received copies of a fine DVD package designed by Miss Kramer, a graphic designer by trade. Another person who played a large part in its restoration is Christopher Bird, film collector, film and TV director and editor, and lecturer at the NFTS, the National Film and Television School, familiar to many from his documentaries made with Kevin Brownlow, also a good friend and colleague to both the Bioscope and Movie Silently. He was the film's associate producer and editor for this home release and has kindly assisted in the film's preparation, along with Todd Higginson from the Bioscope team for this premiere online screening, helping me to facilitate tonight's first, for which I am personally very grateful. This boy's own story, and it really is a boy's own story, as there are no female characters in the film, apart from the brief appearance of a doom-laden crone encountered in a field near the start, after which no female is to be seen again for its duration. It was released as a standalone film in 1917, then re-released later the same year as part of an entire cinema theatre programme of shorts and feature, all produced by Edison, under the label of its Conquest programmes, this being number 9 in a series of 12. In Movie Silently's home release, another successful objective was met when Fritzi reunited the film with its accompanying shorts, for a true taste of recreating a 1917 night at the movies, and so her main release was happily supported by these titles: Friends, Romans and Leo, a comedy featuring Edison players, Little Red Riding Hood, a silhouette fairy tale played by the troupe, a nature documentary film, Microscopic Pond Life, and a scenic look around quaint province town. It was Forum Films who distributed the Conquest programmes, and Kenneth Hodkinson, its general manager, who was interviewed in Motography magazine, said, "We have been receiving a great number of requests and inquiries, particularly from churches, schools, colleges, humane societies, women's clubs, and organisations of a similar kind. The class of picture which we will release will not be of the milk and water type, but live and vital stories interesting to the whole family." So the lofty aim and promise of these programmes, as quoted from a contemporary advert in the accompanying booklet for the 2018 release, was to provide the open road to entertainment and knowledge, and provided the first definite contribution in the propaganda to popularise clean and wholesome films for all right-thinking Americans. Good grief. And the contemporary press weren't slow to pick up on the innocuousness of Edison's version of the programme's feature film, with trade magazine Motography noting in its review that the producers have reached one of their aims in the production of this picture. They have sought to eliminate all objectionable handling of the sex question, and in Kidnapped they had not the slightest difficulty, for this production has the distinction of not having a woman in it at all. Aficionados of Robert Louis Stevenson will be well placed to see the differences between his text and the story carved out here for the film. Motography magazine praised the photography for being unusually effective. Alan Crosland directs ably, and the players put on a good show with some solid settings, which our welcome guest, Fritzi Kramer, will shortly talk about in her specially recorded spoken introduction and slideshow. In addition to this, Fritzi has also designed a special Kennington Bioscope and Movies Silently logo, KB and MS, which you'll see in the corner of your screen, and thank you for that too, Fritzi. Just to remind you that John Sweeney will be playing live for us, and now I'd like to hand over to Fritzi. Thank you very much and enjoy the film.
The release of Kidnapped started with a vintage celebrity cookbook. I found a reference to actor Robert Kane and looked up his filmography because I had never heard of him. The title Kidnapped and the name Alan Breck immediately leapt out at me because I'm a huge fan of Robert Louis Stevenson. My curiosity was piqued when I saw many resources listed it as lost. In fact, it was safe and sound in the Library of Congress in the collection of producer George Cliney. Cliney had been collaborating with the Edison Film Company, which was in its last months as a going concern. Despite the fact that the studio was dying, the filmmakers, mostly a young Alan Crosland, managed to make some impressive pictures. Crosland is probably best known today for directing Don Juan, The Beloved Rogue, and most famously, The Jazz Singer, and Kidnapped is possibly his first completed feature film. While it does reveal the director's inexperience at times, it's generally a zippy, fun swashbuckler with good lead performances. Cliney was out to make family-friendly pictures that were made on a shoestring. That being said, Kidnapped looks more expensive than its probable budget would lead us to believe. A shortage of extras gives us some clue, but clever use of resources on the American East Coast helped to elevate the look and feel of the production. While we were working on this, Chris did some digging and found many similarities to Libby's New York castle, once home to Boss Tweed, and Paterno Castle in Manhattan. The ship scenes were shot on an old brig that was purchased for the production, and the shore scenes were shot in Sandy Hook, New Jersey. These cost-cutting measures actually lend heft and authenticity to the film because real wood, real stone, real sand are more convincing than sets or modern CGI, though I'm sure viewers familiar with Scottish landmarks will be able to spot the Americanness of the setting right away. One decision we made early in the project was to restore the tinting that was likely included in the original release. The main reason we decided this was that there's a brief scene early in the picture that relies on a character not seeing something in the dark. Without blue tinting, the message of the scene is unclear, though readers of the novel Kidnapped will understand what's happening in all likelihood. But this blue tinting immediately conveys that the character is in a dimly lit area and can't see what's in front of him, and is therefore in danger. So after that, it was basically in for a penny, in for a pound, and we used our best judgment to select tints that would have been used during that time. I hope you enjoy this presentation. It's a fun little crowd pleaser, and it did receive positive reviews when it was first released, and I think it holds up and is just as enjoyable a century later.
Our sincerest thanks to John Sweeney for his sensational playing for Kidnapped, and to Costas Fotopoulos and Cyrus Gabrysch for a fab first half. The feature looked and sounded so great, and it was really most cooling and refreshing to see some snow in there on this hottest midsummer day of the year. Our huge gratitude is extended to the Filmmuseum and its excellent work, and to curator Elif Rongen-Kaynakçi and to the Library of Congress for preserving Kidnapped and many, many more films besides. And of course, our deepest thanks go to Fritzi Kramer for her work on and release of the film, which just goes to show that curiosity, research and dogged persistence wins the day and sees us enjoying forgotten and neglected films. And also thank you, Fritzi, for your brilliant slideshow and introduction, which you, the audience, will be able to enjoy again and again along with the film, and our previous episodes 1 through 4, plus other full-length documentary content and talks right here on our YouTube channel. The show is put together by the Bioscope team, including the musicians and other generous associates, all giving their time gratis to bring you the show for free. So please, if you would like, do find below in the drop box here the link to our coffee donation page, or on the header of our Twitter page, to raise us a cup for our efforts and to contribute towards future programming. Please also find below on this page the link to Fritzi's Patreon and her fantastic Movie Silently website, chock full of extensive silent movie reviews and fun-size versions for a silent film taster during a coffee break. And of course, for the full Fritzi effect, do follow her on Twitter. Plus, you can also find the link to Chris Bird's own website, also given below, where you can see details of the films he's made. And I can tell you that a documentary that he made with Kevin Brownlow about the making of Buster Keaton's 1928 film for MGM, The Cameraman, will be re-emerging on the film's upcoming Criterion home release. Our thanks as ever to the Cinema Museum and its volunteers, to the Bioscope team for all of their work in curation and thoughtful input towards our output, to Todd for film preparation, subtitling, and for managing the chat box in the live YouTube broadcast, and to Cyrus for the show's live production, to John for joining us live and all the musicians, and to all of you for your enthusiastic championing, chatboxing, tweeting, retweeting and general support for these shows. And above all, thank you for watching and listening from wherever you are in the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and to our email list to receive updates on further upcoming presentations. And we wish you all the very best. Have a good evening, stay safe, and goodbye for now. Bye.
Baby, did I do? Do you love me, baby? Sure, I love her, baby. Precious baby, did I do?